Hello everyone and welcome to It's Just Peachy. I'm your host, Jill.
And I'm your co-host, Sammy.
And today we're starting a new series on serial killers. Want to tell us who our first victim is?
This one is specifically Jeffrey Dahmer.
Or the real-life Cannibal Hector.
Yep.
Or Hannibal. I don't remember what one it was called.
Hannibal, Cannibal, but...
They're both the same. They're both terrible.
Yeah.
Okay. So, first of all, let's discuss who he was.
So, he was a very
troubled child, kind of. He grew up in a bad home. His parents were always arguing and always moving around. They finally settled here in Ohio.
And when they did, he was not a very normal child. He didn't really find that much sympathy or empathy towards things. And in his high school, he would drink whiskey all the time. And
even in class, especially.
In class. And he would also take cats and dogs and staple them to trees and
he'd also decapitate them beforehand, too.
Yeah.
And these were stray animals that he was finding in doing this to.
Yeah.
Later on in life, his dad even sent him to the military because he wanted him to do something with his life. He actually got kicked out of the military for drinking too much.
Yep. And since he was alone a lot in his life because of his parents being torn apart, he decided to fantasize about killing. And it became an obsession.
And mind you, this was before anything was socialized. He was also gay. He was not openly gay because at the time it was not accepted socially.
Exactly.
So he would go to bars and just specifically look and target gay men. And these men were categorized. He figured out if basically the family of the guy that was gay, if he told his family and they were openly loving about him still and cared about him, he wouldn't basically not kill them. And if the family didn't care and basically excluded him from the family, then those were his targets.
Yeah, because when you're excluded from a family, it's very hard and you feel alone a lot. And I think one of the biggest things with him was since he felt so alone, instead of gaining like a hobby or liking something that a lot of normal people would like, he fantasized and enjoyed the death of others, or even just wanting to, do things to their bodies, like dissolve in acid and,
cut them up.
Yeah, and do things to their corpses.
Yeah, he was really into necrophilia.
Yeah, and since he was so alone and accustomed to all of these things that he had been going through, he became more used to killing, and it was something that he didn't find as that serious or that big of a problem.
And they totaled all of his victims. He had 17 victims that they know of that he killed. And granted, when he was doing all these killings, he moved into Wisconsin area with his grandma to live. And then he also, a little while after, he got an apartment and started killing again.
And every day in this apartment, he would drink gin all day, every day.
And of course, that racks up, so he had a job, too. It didn't disclose what job he had. We just know he had a job.
And the people that he victimized, he wanted to make sure they felt alone and upset so he could comfort them and invite them to his home to commit the murders that he was doing.
He would offer them a drink when they got to his house, and he would actually put a drug in there that would basically make him fall asleep. This is when he would start these horrible acts. And after that was done, he usually ended up strangling them to kill them and then desecrate the bodies.
He would also sometimes eat part of these bodies as well. And a lot of the times that he would have been caught by the police, he wasn't, because of how outgoing and how confrontational he was.
Another thing, he experimented with these bodies, with these unconscious bodies, even the dead ones. He would perform biopsies on them to figure out how these people were working, and even try and bring them back to life in a zombie type mode. But none of it none of it worked.
Yeah, and he would also try to drill holes in the sides of people's heads for experimentations. And one of these victims ended up escaping. And like I said before, he would have gotten in trouble with this, but since he was so outgoing and nice to the police, they didn't really think there was an emergency going on. He said when this person who was at his house and dealing with all of the things he was putting them through, he ran out naked and was trying to ask for help from the police, but instead Jeffrey Dahmer came and he said, well, I have my boyfriend here and he just became too drunk, and ended up taking him back to his place, and that's where he ended up dying.
And that was his 16th victim, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
With his next victim, he actually did get loose, and he actually ran. He told the police. And then they started a trial period where they were gathering all the evidence to take to court. He was murdering people still in that period between the court hearing.
Yep.
To the point where he did get caught. They went into his apartment. It smelled bad. There's blood everywhere, chemicals everywhere, body parts everywhere.
And he also had, I think it was a cooler full of like livers and skulls and all of it.
Oh, I couldn't imagine that smell.
I couldn't imagine like being the police walking in there and seeing all of this and finding all of this evidence.
In the documentary, the cop actually said he heard a scream and then later realized it was him screaming himself, going into this crime scene.
Oh, jeez, I couldn't imagine.
And mind you, these people are probably not even cared about because their family didn't want them because they were gay.
Yeah, and it's very unfortunate that this situation happened like this, and nobody in his family ever suspected nor actually helped him with any of his problems. Whether they knew if he was, gay or straight really doesn't, change what he did and how his family treated him.
And eventually all this caught up to him. He was put in trial. There was a problem, though. His lawyers pleaded insanity. So that means they had to go through, basically he wasn't in the right mental state. So they were trying to figure out, maybe instead of sending him to jail, they should send him to a mental institute. Which in any case is not any better than a jail. If anything, it's worse.
Well, either way, I mean, he's still going to get, like, if he did plead for insanity and that went through like that, I mean, you never really know if he actually has some serious problems where he actually can't function like some normal human beings can. But at the same token, he could also be falsely accusing himself for insanity.
And if he is, and he gets sent to a mental hospital, a lot of people, even if they do plead insanity and they're not, they go insane in those mental institutes.
Yep.
Because all the people around them, what's happening to them. everything.
Yeah, and everything that goes on in like in an asylum is usually not the best.
No.
Because, most of those patients are already, in the process of either, trying to get better, and some of them are just at their lowest. And there's really nothing that anybody can really do.
No, there's nothing, and it's the sad thing that happens. Especially, I believe, around the time that this was happening, experimentation on the mentally insane and gay were still going on.
Yeah.
So even if he was sent to a mental institute, it would have been way worse. Way, way worse than going to jail.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%. And I feel like, even if he were to go to jail and they didn't plead insanity, you never know what he could be up to next. Just because of how well he hid how crazy he was in front of the cops, it's very baffling to me how people can act so normal after committing such a bad, multiple serious crimes,
Yeah, it sucks, but it's the world we live in, and we just need to learn how to deal with it and figure out how to move on. I feel bad for these victims that actually had caring, loving homes, even if their parents didn't like them. Even if then, because then they regret their decision on kicking them out and not seeing them for their last time.
Right. And usually a lot of problems with that is, it's usually, not all of the time, but some of the time it's based on how you're raised. And if you're being left alone and left out all the time and being just excluded from the family, it's definitely going to cause some mental problems and questions that appear in your head, like if there's anything wrong with me, or, am I just not normal, am I not the same? And usually when those questions come up, you start liking things you may not have liked before, and things that might not be what a normal person thinks.
Yeah, and, that's all I really have for this case.
Me too. Now, I do feel like, do you think if he had a different family and they were, including him and making sure he felt great around them, do you think he still would have committed these murders?
It's a possibility that he could still be committing these murders. But if he came from a loving family that didn't argue like his family did, it could be a possibility that he wouldn't have turned out the way he did.
Or at least not to some extent.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really just depends on, what actually affects them,
Whether it's the people around them, or
just even another person influencing them, You never really know if he had somebody else that was, behind the scenes that nobody really knows about.
Yeah. But it just happens to be that way, I guess.
Yeah. It's very unfortunate for all those victims, but at the same time, I'm very glad that he was caught and he was tried for all the things and crimes committed.
Yep. And this actually wraps up our first serial killer case on our new series.
Yep. It was nice being here and talking to you guys.
It was nice talking, and we'll see you in the next podcast.